Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm DarcyBits, and today we got something a little bit different. I'm not super sure how this is going to play out, but I like a good role-playing game, such as D&D. And I remember a while back I was thinking it would be really nice to have a tool that one could use to help improvise your scenes and monsters and stuff. My favorite style of DMing is to just kind of wing it and see what happens. And that doesn't always work if you can't think on your feet to make something happen. You got to really be proactive as a GM. If you're too reactive, well, that works if your party is great. But if they're not proactive players, then you need to be the one that's proactive to get them going, right? But if you're in that situation where your players are doing stuff and you need to be reacting to it on the fly, sometimes you can be caught in a situation where you don't really know what to do. Because you're like, I don't have stats for if you attack the bartender. Crap, right? And sure, you could just, like, say, here's, like, a commoner and blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't have a lot of flavor to it. And what I'm interested in doing today is seeing if we can use Urza's AI to randomly generate cards which we then extrapolate our sort of D&D stat blocks from. Now, I'm not saying these are going to give us an actual, like, here's the mathematical, like, oh, their power becomes their strength and their toughness becomes their... I'm not saying anything like that, but it will give you a good starting point. Like, okay, this is actually kind of a small, like, not very strong physically, but they might actually have some really powerful abilities, and we can, like, workshop that. And obviously you don't want to be doing too much, like, workshopping if you're trying to be doing things live at the table, but I think there is potential for this to work. So I'm going to generate some random cards to represent random monsters. I think this will be a really fun way of doing sort of a hex crawl or a West Marches style game too, where you are saying the party travels to this random hex and they have a random encounter there. Instead of having a table of random encounters, we generate something. Or maybe you do have a table of random encounters and those are your prompts that you then feed into Urza's AI. So I'm interested in trying this out. Let's get started. As such, let's start with something a bit classic, right? We want, let's say, a raiding party of goblins shows up and the party is, like, ambushed. So let's just keep it simple. Goblin ambush. Now, that might actually give us, like, a non-creature spell, which is not what we're going for, but it also could make total sense to be a creature spell. So, Goblin ambush, yeah, it's giving us a non-creature, which makes sense. I should have thought of that. Deals 2 damage. Not super relevant to us anyway, just, like, not interesting. But it is going to give us that little bit of flavor. One of the most interesting tools, especially as, like, a D&D tool, I think is going to be that flavor text. It's going to breathe some life into our world, hopefully. We're going to ignore this one for now, though. I probably should give it a different name. I just wanted to start off with something sort of simple, and of course, it's not. Goblin Ambush is a 2-mana sorcery. Destroy all creatures. You lose life equal to their toughness. That's actually kind of a cool design, right? It's a very cheap wrath, but it punches you if you, like, wrathed too many things. That's kind of fun. It's a thin line between life and death. Can we use this, actually? I was hoping to go for creatures, but, like, now I'm actually kind of interested, right? You're rolling down the road in a wagon, and GM says, all right, you know, a bunch of goblins pop out of the walls and they attack you. It's not gonna kill everyone instantly because that's not how D&D works, but that would be weird. But actually, I kind of want to, like, do some sort of goblin vampires. Have there ever been goblin vampires? Okay, I may be off track, but I want to see. I guess ambushing is really what it... Ambushing doesn't seem like a real word. Goblin. I mean, I guess this is sort of the idea of, like, how do you spiral off into something interesting? Was never the plan to do it like this, but sure. Here we are. took a couple rolls, but now we've changed our input, and it's ambushing goblin vampires. A 3-mana 1/1 goblin. Not a vampire. It should be. Let's just pretend it is. For 2, sacrifice this. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. Bone Shaker's Ambush. Vampires don't know when to give up. Ambushing goblin vampires. So, yeah, if I'm playing D&D and I just want to make something generally random, I wish I could use this picture to be like, hey, players, here's a cool, like, this is a general idea of what you're running into. In fact, actually, the first time I ever thought about using sort of AI for D&D was just to be like, I want you to be able to, like, on the fly, be like, this is kind of what you're looking at. And I think it's actually a really good tool for that. This picture, of course, is not super relevant, but you could use it to influence your description, right? Like these sort of short green goblins with, like, red wings, maybe. That sounds kind of interesting, just, like, kind of flowing out of their back. They're very small, just, like, probably 2 feet, maybe 3, down on the ground. And they're just, like, rushing it. There's a whole bunch of them, but they're just, like, rushing at you with no regard for their own lives. They feel like if they die, they don't even mind. And then when they die, maybe I add some special ability where they can actually, like, do something in response to dying. Obviously, this is not in response to dying trigger. This is a sacrifice, but, similar effect. It's like, oh, it's going to die anyway. I might as well have it kill something very strong. Again, obviously, since this is D&D, you wouldn't just kill a player, but you could use that to influence something. You could do a lot of damage where some sort of ability happens, and you make something up. You see what you can do. With that in mind, okay, that's our, like, goblin encounter, which turned out to be vampires. And all the players are now like, whoa, vampires? What's going on here? Bone Shakers? The Bone Shakers are, I guess, like a faction of goblins. That's, like, a useful thing for us as GM, so we didn't have to come up with a goblin faction. Very interesting. Let's actually make, like, a leader for these goblins. I'm like, okay, cool, so I've got the idea of, like, the general shape of these things. I'm going to take the goblin stat block. I'm going to, like, maybe even make them a little bit weaker than they normally would be. That give them this other ability. Cool. We got, like, 4 or 5 of them. Excellent. Let's give a leader. So let's say, I don't know, let's just come up with something. We're a GM. We can do that. Gravid Bone Shaker Lord. Now, probably this isn't going to be a goblin or a vampire, but that's okay. We can ignore the type line and just kind of, like, see what we can do here. Gravid Bone Shaker Lord is a 5-mana 5/3 skeleton warrior. That's just completely vanilla. They're just like, I'm strong, what you doing? But also, like, kind of weak at the same time. They have, like, maybe low health but high damage. The Skull of the Dead cannot speak, but I think I can guess its thoughts. Igor. Oracle of Bone Shaker. Interesting. So maybe they have, like, some kind of companion that's with them. This, like, silent goblin vampire who leads these other vampires, but they have this, like, other, like, Igor creature who speaks for them. I don't know what that means, but, like, you can see how this is, like, a useful tool for just, like, spilling off into stuff. Maybe you wouldn't do this live at the table. Maybe you'd be like, I gotta do some prep for today's game, and I don't really know where to start. Boom, 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 let's just make some random cards, right? And also, like, speaking of random cards, something I always forget about Urza's AI is you can just leave it blank. You can just be like, no, I'm gonna just tell me what I'm doing today. Okay, we got Imperial Vanguard. Sure, okay. So today, when we're playing, we're going to have a thing where they're on the roads and the Imperial Vanguard stops them. Why are they stopping them? I don't know. Let's find out. 5-mana 2/3, so expensive but small but has flying. That's interesting. Maybe they're, like, riding griffins or something. We can work with that. When Imperial Vanguard enters the battlefield, target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains flying until end of turn. Great, cool. So maybe this isn't even a issue. Maybe the Imperial Vanguard approach and say, hey, I know you're going off on this quest. We would like to escort you. We have griffin mounts ready for the entire party. And the party's, like, going to be super suspicious of this because, like, why the heck would you do this to me? Your convictions are more important than your health. If you feel a call, then you must go. There is no one to answer but yourself. That's super interesting. I don't know what to do with that right now. I'm going to ignore it for the moment. But, like, yeah. And that's, like, I think something I want to try doing more in my own GMing is just, like, doing things that are nice without a good reason, right? Now, obviously, in the moment, the big thing that I always struggle with as GM is that, like, players can ask you questions. The idea of just being like, here's a game where this person does something really nice. And in like a video game, you can be, the player is going to be like, why'd they do that? Oh, I'm so confused. Oh, I'm interested. I want to see where this is going, right? But in a D&D game, the player just goes like, why the heck would you do that? Like, so as a GM, I need to have a response prepared, and I don't. I never do. So that always gets me. Or it stops me from doing things like this. But I kind of like the idea of like, I'm going to have this Imperial Vanguard show up with griffins, and they say, hey, you know, you're off on a quest. We're going to give you some assistance to at least escort you there. And that's going to make your players super on edge and like, are these people trying to kill us? Why would they help us like this? What's going on? What do they want from it? And maybe you do kill them with the Vanguard later. Maybe you don't. But it's going to like add some tension to the table, and that's always fun. So that's super interesting. But of course, well, maybe they get in a fight with these Imperial Vanguards. And you're like, well, there's a bunch of Griffins here, actually. You know, so Vanguard Griffin might be an interesting, like, okay, well, I need to stat out a Griffin real quick. Let's see what I can do. We know the Vanguard's actually pretty weak. But the Griffins themselves, okay, also kind of weak. What's interesting here is I'm using kind of the ratio of, like, cost to, like, power and toughness as opposed to the actual stats. Like, you know, being a 2/4 is, like, perfectly fine. But for 5 mana, it feels bad. Whenever it attacks, defending player discards a card. Pretty cool effect. So, what does that look like? Okay, I'm going to say we'll use these Griffins, and I can sort of shape out a body. They have a bit more health, and they have attack. Cool, we can do something with that. Again, these aren't one-to-one stats, but they'll give us an idea. Also, Griffins just exist in D&D, so you'll probably just use them and not worry about it too much. But, oh, they, like, when they attack, if any player discards a card, what's discard represent? Well, discards usually represents, like, forgetting things, right? You're, like, prepared to cast a spell, and then you forget it, so maybe they have some form of, like, disruption ability. Maybe it's like whenever you're attacked by the Griffin attack hits you, it impairs your next attack 1 time, or something like that, right? Like, causes some kind of distracting thing. A lot of stuff you can do with that. An entire city, over 1,000 people, has gathered at the edge of the forest to greet the Griffin. Ooh, interesting. I guess I just really enjoy the, like, flavor and culmination of all the little aspects into a card. But I don't feel like that, like, it's inspiring, right? It's inspiring in a way that I don't feel needs to be limited to Magic the Gathering, which I think is really, really cool and interesting. And okay, cool. This is actually very similar to when I was just doing the full flavored foraging, but I'm not really worried about it being this like flow of stuff for the purposes of Magic. This is flow of flavor for the purposes of other uses, such as D&D. So we're going through that. Let's not worry about the Vanguard right now. Maybe we need some kind of big bad evil guy. That's always a thing. BBEG, as they say. What's a classic? I guess like we could use like a Lich or something. You know what? I'm kind of not feeling like coming up with my own monster at the end. Who is the end of everything I come up with is going to feel cliche. Let's see. Blood Duel is a 2-mana aura. Enchant creature has tap. Target player discards a card at random. Interesting. That's cool. The Ferocious on both sides. The monsters united in rage. I don't really know what that means, but I think I might be able to like say, okay, that's a cool ability. Let's like work that into our inevitable thing. And it's called Blood Duel. This sounds like some kind of vampire lord, but like maybe there's some kind of like aristocrat that has this like, you know, dueling rapier sort of like honorable combat element to them. That's like an interesting idea for a character. Obviously it's not too out of line for vampires. That's like a pretty normally vampire thing, but still there's something interesting there. We can play off of that. The Ferocious on both sides, the monsters united in rage. I don't know what that sentence means, but the Ferocious is capitalized. It makes me want to use Ferocious as a like jumping off point. So, but I think you know, I'm actually going to use Ferocious, but it's going to have a comma, and it's going to be Blood Duelist. Now, this is probably going to become a vampire, but if it doesn't, ooh, that could be really interesting. Let's see what they end up doing with it. Holy crap, it's a Planeswalker? What? Ferocious Blood Duelist is a 3-mana, 3 loyalty Jace Planeswalker. I'm going to copy this before it goes away because it will show up in my text document. Ferocious Blood Duelist. +1. exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may cast one of those cards this turn. If you cast it without paying its mana cost, what? Draw a card. Until the end of your next turn, you don't lose this mana. What? Until this mana as steps and phases end. For -2, which is templated wrong, but that's okay. Until end of turn, creatures you control gain First Strike and Lifelink and get +1/+0, and gain Death Touch and at the beginning of your end step, if this creature is untapped, put a 1/1 counter on it. There's too much there. As much as, like, more is useful for, like, you know, like, hey, okay, cool, we got a Ferocious Blood Duelist. We don't really know exactly what they are, because obviously they're not going to be Jace. That's kind of weird. But there's some kind of Planeswalker. We can work with that in Magic, or in D&D. And, like, yeah, they're, like, some kind of, you know, Blood Duelist lord. They can, like, buff up their underlings and stuff. That's pretty interesting, right? Well, you can do something with that. And First Strike is a duelist mechanic usually, so they've got, like, dueling thralls that heal, probably a vampire, you know? There's a lot there, but again, we can just sort of pick and choose. We're using this as inspiration for our D&D. So, okay, this is inspiring. We can write down some of the stuff that's useful here, but let's actually just try that again because it's clearly a little bit over-designed. This is only a human soldier. I'm kind of into that. The idea of, like, oh, no, this is not a vampire, but, like, maybe they're, like, a human who has control over a bunch of vampires. That's interesting. Or uses vampires as, like, a weapon. That's, like, a cool idea. Tap, destroy target red permanent. Activate only during your turn before attackers are declared. It's really boring, but whatever. What is your purpose here? My savage. Wow. Brutal. But yeah, you can work out that. Okay, cool. So this is human soldier who actually rallies a bunch of vampire troops that does some stuff. Very weird. Ferocious Blood Duelist is a 5-mana human knight. They're a 2/2 with haste. When they enter the battlefield, if they're kicked, which they can't be, if they were, though, they enter the battlefield with +1/+1 counters on it. With a +1/+1 counter on it. So what does this mean for us? Not a ton, but okay. They're, again, like, small but fast. Definitely you can work that into your design space if that's something that you wanted to do. Her blade was cut through. No, her blade has cut through her enemy's heart and claimed victory. Cool. Interesting. You know, I could definitely see this. Another take is 3-mana star. Their power and toughness equal to the number of warriors on the battlefield. So again, like, yeah, sure, warriors are, like, different than, like, soldiers or duelists or anything, but I feel like all of these things do come together to say this is some kind of BBG that is, like, this duelist character that has a bunch of other, like, soldiers or like fighters at their disposal that they can rally and lord over. Maybe they are not a vampire, but their underlings are. Lots of interesting things there. And, you know, I as the GM still need to, like, expand on these concepts. But that doesn't mean that I can't, you know, but, like, I can, right? Like, this gives me a starting point, and I think that's really, really fun. I do like to come back to the idea of, like, if you are playing and your character, the characters just, like, do something that you completely didn't expect, and you're like, oh no, I have no idea what's behind that door. I don't know. What is behind the door? Do you know? Do I? I don't know. What's behind the door is a 4-mana sorcery. Create a treasure token. That's not super helpful, but okay, sure. They open the door. They find, like, a treasure room. That's interesting. Have a thimble full of curiosity. Ernest O'Toole, Goblin Treasure Hunter. Well, let's just use them. That sounds amazing. Oh, I gotta actually do that. That's a shame. Ernest O'Toole is a Goblin Treasure Hunter. Now, normally I wouldn't make a name that long. That's probably going to get cut up, but that's okay. I don't need the mana cost. That's not really relevant to us right now. But, alright, sure. I mean, maybe this is some NPC that we want to establish beforehand because we know they're going somewhere interesting. Maybe they open it and they find a treasure hunter, like, looting this room that they just, like, walked into. And they're like, holy crap, what are you doing here? How'd you even get in here? I thought this was the only door. And, of course, there's, like, some other entrance or maybe some other exit if our players need to get out of there. I don't know. Ernest O'Toole, Goblin Treasure Hunter, costs an amount of mana, some of it red. Legendary creature, Goblin Rogue, they're a 2/2, and they can tap to destroy target artifact. It can't be regenerated. Interesting. Okay, so they're this, like, treasure hunter, but they also break things really easily? Or maybe they're, like, some kind of, like, obviously they're a Goblin Rogue as written here, not an artificer, but you could do something with that. There's some kind of, like, engineerist, bomb maker person. They blow things up. I can see that. Obviously it's... Or maybe it's just like a rogue thing. They have like solvents to get through locks and stuff. That would work too. His greed has turned him into a parasite on the city's good works. So now we've got this like starting point for this like kind of legitimately interesting to me NPC. Want to see where that goes now. But like, I'm interested in this idea. I think this is a cool concept. What other things can we do with that, right? Okay, maybe, you know, okay, we're in the treasure room. What treasures are here? What treasures are here? That's a great idea. We need some kind of relic. Okay, how about, we'll start with O'Toole. O'Toole's treasure. What did they find? What did they find in the treasure room? When we bust in and we find them with a treasure, what is that treasure? It's 2 cards. That's not helpful. When treasure hunters discovered O'Toole's chest, they were overwhelmed with joy and delight. Some lost their heads and others lost their lives. Not useful to us right now, but okay, sure. It's something good. It's worth 2 cards if you're playing Magic. O'Toole's treasure. Again, draw 2 cards. Target opponent discards 2 cards. Sure. Flavor text is really what's going to help us here. I've lost count of how many treasures I found in the Black Moraz. Ooh, well, we can use that. I don't know what that is. The Black Moraz is definitely somewhere, though. But none is more spectacular than this. Well, that's not useful, is it? I want to know what it is. But, I mean, even just from an AI-generated art standpoint, we could use this picture and be like, okay, you go into the treasure room, and here's what you see. All these, like, amazing treasures. Now... treasures can always be a little bit awkward in D&D because it's like, okay, everyone wants treasures, but just being like, you have a full room of treasure. Like, what does that even look like? How do you actually like codify that in the rules of the game? And you can't just be like, it's like 500 gold. Like, you know what? 500 gold would certainly cover a lot of space. So not unreasonable to just be like, it's a massive lump sum of gold. But that's kind of boring. So let's change treasure to like relic. Maybe we can give it some kind of actual use case instead of just being it's treasure. O'Toole's relic is a 1-mana artifact. It taps for white and blue. That's a pretty strong card. Spend this mana only to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with the creature. That's not... Okay. So any creature that doesn't have no creature types, I guess? Weird. But either way, okay, cool. So it's mana generating. You can work with that. Obviously, like, because it's magic, it's going to be really leaning into the whole, like, mana and spells and stuff. But sure, okay, maybe there is some kind of, you know, relic in the room that helps your spellcasters power up more quickly. Maybe it's one of those things that lets you sort of, like a pearl of power or something. A good thing to remember is that even the most advanced devices can be crippled by poorly placed forces. I don't know what that means. This is such a weird video because I don't have like a specific thing I'm building to, right? I'm not actually like telling the story of these adventures going through and discovering things about the world, but I'm trying to just showcase different use cases for this as a tool for your home games. I keep going back to goblins because goblins are fun, but I don't know, let's get some kobolds, right? Lair of kobolds. Maybe we can get a land that people can explore. That could be interesting. Lair of Kobolds is a 3-mana zombie kobold creature. It's purely flavor text. Kobolds see in each other's eyes and speak with each other's thoughts. Oh, what? Okay, so there's some kobolds that you want to put in your game. Maybe you don't bother calling them kobolds because some nerds might get upset about that. But they're like undead. Maybe they're not actually zombies. Maybe there's something else. Got to remember that like liches are codified as zombies in Magic, so that and then they're not liches in D&D. So there's some wiggle room there. But sure, they're kobolds. They're undead in some way, and they have this like telepathic communication with other kobolds or with other undead of that same thing. So very cool. Don't know what we actually would call this though, so that could be a little interesting. If we wanted to sort of spill off of this point, we could try moving on to the deck builder and use this as a sort of a deck building prompt instead. So let's actually try that real quick. I'm just going to jump to the deck builder. I'm going to choose black, and I'm going to put in zombie kobolds in the type line, and we're gonna just make this. I said type line, I mean in the name of the deck. I usually don't make my decks like this. I'm not super I like changing the actual JSON file and really getting in there. This isn't going to give us just purely random cards. These are going to have this formatting of like, this is a legendary planeswalker and stuff like, and that was defined preemptively by the deck builder itself. It wasn't randomly generated, and that's okay. It'll still give us a good spot to work from. Probably give us some pretty cool things like Tharok, King of Sheldor, which is a legendary planeswalker. Tharok obviously doesn't have any loyalty because the card's broken, but that's okay. Whenever a player casts a white spell, you may pay 1 generic. If you do, you gain 2 life. Cool, weird, very odd, not actually useful. You wouldn't run it in this deck, for example, but that's okay. Maybe I'll actually reroll that one. But the point being is, I don't usually use the just like stick in the name, click the color, but I do find that it is a nice way of just jumping into it real quick, so you don't have to write up the thing if that's something that is going to slow you down. Liliana Vest is just actually Liliana Vest. That's not super helpful, but okay. 5 mana, 3 loyalty, +1. Target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. She follows the scent of blood like a deer. Not Liliana Vest. Liliana Vest said that about somebody. I'm going to just ignore this one and see if we can move on to something interesting. Here we are, actually a zombie kobold. Very good. 2 mana, 2/2 zombie kobold. When dead man's hand dies, you may exile target creature card from a graveyard. If you do, you gain 2 life. What does this mean? All right, so we've got some like zombie kobold. The most interesting thing here is probably the fact that you could be like, this is a dead man's hand, and your players would be like, what? It's like, yeah, no, that's the name of this monster. It's a dead man's hand. They're kobolds, but they're dead. And if you kill them, you may exile a creature from a graveyard if you do. So not super like, how do you codify that into D&D? You don't really, but you can still use it as a jumping off point. You can be like, all right, so they're going to have something that happens when they die, which will disrupt my opponent. That's like what the Magic analog would be. So let's use it. Also healing. So maybe you've got like some, often with fights, you don't just have a whole bunch of underlings. You have someone controlling them. So maybe that person gets healed when one of their the dead man's hands dies. That could be interesting. Festering Ghoul is a zombie giant. Are the kobolds working with giants? Maybe, maybe not. Like, we can just have maybe this is a giant kobold. That works as well. Depends on what you want to do with it. You got to take some liberties with this. Again, it's just inspiration. Festering Ghoul is a 2 mana 3/3 zombie giant. As Festering Ghoul enters the battlefield, you may reveal a card name written on it. If you do, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. There's no card name written on it, but again, we don't care if these are functional Magic cards right now. The idea of like, okay, when they show up, the Festering Ghoul always is going to have another thing with it. So we got this like giant dead kobold, and maybe it's got some other thing with it. Festering Ghoul is not a great name for a kobold creature, but that's okay. As the odor of rot intensified, the bloated husk squirmed with hunger. All right, so maybe there's something with that, right? Like there's like this massive dead giant here, and all these like kobolds are like living around it. Classic. Like any seasoned or barely seasoned D&D player is going to be like, oh, that dead giant's going to get up in the middle of this fight, right? And you can be like, yup, it is right now, and it just gets up and boom, like it's like, it's not that any of these are like super original thoughts. I'm not trying to say that I'm like a great GM here. I'm saying like just having that seed of inspiration so that you're not starting with a blank page is so cool. Elder Sorcery is a 2-mana 2/2 zombie wizard. For black and tap, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Okay, so they have some sort of resurrection thing. Obviously, it's in Magic, you'd be resurrecting to the battlefield if it was actually resurrection, as opposed to going into your hand. But that's okay, you know. Like, again, this is not Magic. We're going to use these as inspiration. So cool. Elder Sorcerer is this zombie wizard. Probably they're still a Kobold because that's what we're playing off of right now. And yeah, Kobold wizard. Maybe probably there's some kind of lich, I guess. And they can, you know, resurrect the other kobolds. Maybe they can't do it perfectly. Maybe they come back as like skeletons instead or something. Or maybe they're actually the one who's raising all of these kobolds and they come from something else entirely. Obviously, this isn't the legendary, but like that's okay. You know, we don't need it to be legendary for us to treat it like it's legendary. Even in death, there's so much we can teach. Ulrich of Lulwyn. Well, I need to know who Ulrich of Lulwyn is. I feel like that might be a real name of a real Magic character, but that's okay. Often in D&D, GMs will just wholesale reference real literary work because they, like, not everyone's gonna catch it, and those who do go, hey, I get that reference, and like everyone has a good time, right? This isn't high art, this isn't published, this is just people hanging out and having fun. Crag Witch is a bird. Ooh, it's an artifact creature. Oh, okay, there's something here. That could be lots of things. There could be like some, you know, metal thing that has been assembled engineering style, artifice style, but it could also be like a statue, right? You could have some kind of like, you know, like gargoyle sort of thing. I know gargoyles in D&D are elementals, but you know, they're still like a statue come to life. There's something you could do with that possibly. 3 mana, 1/1 flyer. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, Crag Witch gets +1/+1 till end of turn. So it's a temporary buff, but like maybe you could have this idea that there's a whole swarm of these like Crag Witches and they buff each other as they attack. Maybe like whenever one attacks, the next one in line gets a bonus to its attack roll or something. You could do something interesting with that. I don't know. Its back is nearly as fragile as its song. So they're very, very weak, though. We know this much. They don't sing well, either. Skeletal Servant, 3 mana, 2/1 zombie horror. When Skeletal Servant dies, create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with the normal pest ability. Wait, no, it's not. When this creature dies, deal 1 damage to any target. That's not what pests normally do. Black and tap, create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with black regenerate Skeletal Servant. That's super cool, actually. What? They make pests that could regenerate the pest generator? That's a cool ability. I'm not judging these on cool Magic cards right now, but wow, I really like that. It's not like appropriate, right? You wouldn't give pests different abilities like that. That's not how pests work. But anyway, Skeletal Servant. Okay, are they a zombie? Are they a skeleton? I don't really know. They're probably one of those zombies that's like super like shrink wrapped onto their bones, stuff like that, which totally works. But they can sort of cultivate these pests as like another creature, like a really small thing that's just bothersome, but also like they can, you know, kill to like do things. What does the when this creature dies, it deals damage to any target work? I don't know. I'm sure you can come up with something. In the moment, I'm thinking that you see something where they like crush them and like maybe use them to like cast a magic missile or something. That sounds fun to me. Weird, but I think it could be fun. And likewise, they could also, you know, churn through. It's not like sacrifice to regenerate, which I think that would be kind of fun actually. Something that like makes pests, but then the pests can be like killed to like regenerate you. Or even like, I know they don't want to like use regenerate in like modern Magic anymore, but I'm now imagining a sort of like, you know, treasure token, clue token, blood token, food token, like style token that sacrifices itself to like put a shield counter on something. Probably be really strong, but I like the idea of it. Sounds fun. Anyway. The beggars know only what they eat. Kobold Jailbreaker is another zombie kobold. Awesome. It's a 4 mana 3/2 zombie kobold. As Kobold Jailbreaker enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. When Kobold Jailbreaker enters the battlefield, destroy one of the following. Oh, choose one of the following. Destroy target artifact. That is badly templated, but like, yeah, okay. Cool. So, zombie kobolds. These are called kobold jailbreakers, which is totally just like a proper naming convention for a D&D monster. But they're zombies, and also like I could definitely see using this art. These like massive eyes, but like otherwise pallid, like gray flesh, sort of like shrink wrapped onto the kobold body. Maybe they got like a spear or something. I could see this. I could see this definitely. Let's move back to our otherwise normal layer of the kobolds. There we are. Just to get another angle there, but you can sort of see how that can be like one thing can snowball into another thing. So you can see like definitely the potential here, right? Whether it is purely starting from scratch and just saying like, give me something to go off of, or if you know, okay, crap, they angered the like local deity and I wasn't planning for that. I need to have like, I don't know, an angel come down or something. I do have the god's name from the source book, so maybe I'll have some sort of angel come down and use that. Cool. And yeah, you're still gonna need your stats from D&D, right? And sure, you can come up with stuff on the fly. Like you can definitely come up with stats on the fly if you are a proficient. Proficiency feels so elitist, but like an experienced GM, you can do that a lot easier. Otherwise, you can always find some creature that's similar, right? I'm saying, okay, Axis Champion, 5 mana, 2/3, human warrior with vigilance. It also has Coven, enters the battlefield with a +1 counter for each other multicolored creature you control, which is not how Coven works, but cool, alright. This is something that shows up and it's stronger if it has more people around. It doesn't get weaker if they're not there, but whatever. You could do something with that. I don't know. But I want to see, like, how do I stat this creature? You're probably going to stat them similarly to how you would just stat anything where you go. My party is this strong, so I need a creature that's this strong, right? That's pretty common. So you're probably going to use that as your starting point, but then you can say, okay, well, we got a little bit lower attack, a little bit higher defense. They have vigilance, which I don't know how you would codify that or, like, represent that in D&D, but it certainly it is evocative. You can be like, okay, maybe they have alert or something. In the darkness, he'll find the light. Okay, so maybe this is some kind of like paladin style character, but they need to sort of like root in the darkness before they can actually like finish their like paladinness. Maybe the idea is that this like will become a knight, because knight is how we represent paladins in Magic the Gathering, but right now they're only a warrior and they haven't actually like had that made that oath yet and stuff like that. Like, yeah, totally, you can totally spill off into that. And maybe this isn't a monster, maybe this is an NPC that joins the party. I don't know, maybe you're gonna use this to inspire your own character. Like, okay, I really like druids, and I really like, I don't usually just like put in attributes of a card. I usually actually like name them, but like, okay, sure. I like druids, and I like, I don't know, goblins, and I also like, queens. I don't know. Just random threads. Will that work? I don't know. I've never tried making a card like this before. Cool. 3 mana, 1/2 goblin with green and tap. Search your library for a goblin card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle. Beer's just another weapon in the hands of a goblin queen. Uriagar said that. Or Urigar. What does this mean? I don't know. I'm picturing like a druid who's a goblin. I guess I already put in the goblin thing, so that's not like surprising that it did that. But okay, druid, goblin, maybe they ferment their own alcohol or something. There's definitely a character seed in there somewhere, and they can, help find other goblins. Now, obviously, you're not going to be informing the abilities of your druid. Oh, maybe you will a little bit, because you have options when you're making a character, but you're limited to those options, so you're not going to make up an ability for your person. If they do lend themselves to an ability in D&D, cool. If they don't, that's also fine. This might inform simply their behavior, like maybe they're trying to find other goblins. Maybe they're not used to that, or maybe they're very used to that. Maybe they have a lot of contacts. That's why they can find others. Like, I don't know. A lot of stuff you can do with that. Point is, I hope you will try using Urza's AI, Urza's artificial intelligence, for inspiration as a tool for other things than just. It's a really strong model that generates a lot of really interesting information. It can give you a name. It can give you, power and toughness. And usually you're not going to be using those in one-to-one, but you could use them to inform the difference between something's offensive ability and defensive ability. And it can give you also some other abilities that help inform sort of the behavior or the ability of a monster. And also can give you some flavor text to really spin off into other things as you go. That's really all we have to say today. I hope you enjoy. I hope you try things. And if you're interested in D&D, which I hope you are, I just prattled on about it for the last however long, I will be actually playing some later tonight at this recording. I don't know when it will be going up on YouTube, but it is with my friends over at SideQuest Live, twitch.tv/SideQuest Live. Where I will be joining their previously hiatused game that's picking up again. So it's going to be a great time to jump back in, kind of like a new season premiere, if you will. And I will be joining them. I haven't played with those people in like a year or so, so I'm very excited to get back into some D&D proper. Have a good night, everyone. I've been DarcyBits. I will catch you next time.